Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Baffoe. My guest today is Thabiso Mohare, also known as Afurakan in the poetry and the art scene. He has worked as a copywriter and as a project manager and is co-founder of the Word and Sound Live Literature Company. We're talking about the exhibition that Word and Sound did. How did that come about? I know you said Goethe Institute had a space, but in terms of actually just kind of putting things together, what was that process?
That was challenging because I think from the minute they said we have space, our problem is that we can't say no. But they're already giving us space every second month when we wanted every month, when they said opening exhibition. The hardest part was finding the hard drives because we come from the age of hard drives. The hard drives are there, but you have to search through the hard drives. Some of them boot, some of them, don't even work anymore. You're going through fragmented files. Some shows are complete, some projects are complete, others, it's a mess. So the first thing was trying to create a timeline, like from 2010 to now, to then sort of see, okay, what do we have that's together? What do we have that's, not complete? And then what kind of a theme? Because we also have a lot, so do you want to tell the story of the brand, where it started and where, it is now? Do you want to tell individual stories of poets who have come through the platform and used it? Do we want to sort of showcase the different productions and things we've experimented with, both locally and internationally? So it was a lot, because the story itself is so, it's congested. There's a lot in there. It's packed and it's dense. So the first thing was to try find, okay, what do we have that makes sense? And then what is the focus? I guess then starting to look at curatorial, it's like starting to think like, oh, look at us. And I think we end up looking at showcasing the different formats that we have done. Because we found that in the 15 years, that's sort of the strength of what we have done, like experimenting and doing different things, from open mic to workshops, international collaborations, festivals, recorded productions, video stuff, photography. So all of that is there. So we're like, cool, let's just showcase Slam, let's showcase the festivals, let's showcase Word and Sound Awards. Let's tell the different stories that have brought us here. And that's what we end up going with, like just showing a timeline from 2010, starting with the Slam until I guess before COVID. That's when we paused and then started again 2 years ago. So that ended up being the approach, really, more than.
For you personally, what was it like kind of going through that archive? I mean, that's 15 years of your life.
Yeah.
Intertwined with life, like with everything, family, living, making sense of everything.
Yeah.
Because you're being forced to not just look at the evolution of the business or the organization and the poetry scene,
right?
But it's also essentially because you're intricately tied to it.
Yeah.
So it's literally looking back over 15 years of your life, whether you like it or not.
True. And going back to the original commitment, why did we start this? I think it forced me to go back there. And with Kagaza, my partner, wife now, I think it took us back to say, okay, why did we decide to do this? And it took us back to Newtown. That personally, I grew up in a Newtown where you just needed to show up on a Saturday and there was something happening, whether it was Shivava, Horror Cafe. I mean, those are the spaces that I guess even Melville, I mean, my strongest memories with you are Melville, but I'm sure Newtown is probably where we first met, or we probably had a lot more engagements there. But for me, it took us back to Newtown because I grew up in a Newtown where I got to find my voice. I got to see a lot of people when they were coming up, when they were still hot, fire in their belly. A lot of people were still building. There was still a lot of live bands. So there was still a lot of inspiration to look up to, and I felt that gave me something. By the time we did the dungeon in Melville, I felt like, that if I didn't find spaces like that, where would I have started? You know, and it forced me then to say, okay, we then end up starting Word and Sound because other people created spaces for us. You know what I mean? Whether it was the journeys you guys started with organizing and being the poets just before us, the so-called transitionary poets, you know, yourselves, your labels, your Tumis, you know, the people that we said, oh, poetry is cool, look at them, you know. So we realized that people created spaces, people took risks, people put their livelihoods, their dreams, a lot on the line, right? And we had the duty to go back to that and restart. So I think going through the archive, it took us back to those days to say, look, we started in Newtown because we felt that after the World Cup, Newtown had been just sucked out. There was nothing. Baseline was now Afbob or some sort of a parlor, you know. So it took us back there to say, what was the commitment? And have we lived up to that commitment? Have we created enough spaces? Have we created enough quality spaces? And is there maybe a generation of poets or writers or, you know, voices that have come out that we can look back and say, yo, you know what, at least we have half paid. The work is not, you know, you can't ever fully, give my hardy, I'll fit my hardy, you know, but we felt like, yeah, we sort of started paying it back, you know, and I think that was satisfying to like, you at least, you know. Yeah, but it took us back to those days, man, to Newtown, to Melville, studying in the dungeon, where every Thursday it was the get down, you know, open mic. You guys were the cool guys. We
open mic that used to run for 5 hours until I started nipping all of that stuff in the pipe.
It would run until 1 a.m. and why not?
No, open mic should not be that long.
But there were poets there were comedians, there were singers, you know. It was, I think, the one space that I was overwhelmed. Looking back at it now, I was overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my gosh, so many people walked through that little space, you know, and we were lucky to, I think, you guys at least took us to, you know. You guys sort of, there was a bit of, yeah, okay, there's something here. How do we just not shoo them away, you know? And looking at that, yo, without that, I don't think I would have found feet. I would have found direction. So even going through that archive, it was there, just re-looking or revisiting the parts that you thought didn't make sense. The stuff that I thought was like, yo, oh my God, we're taking chances here. We don't know what we're doing. We were just, I don't know, just feeling it out, but just driven by passion, driven by wanting to do something that's worthwhile. And I think more than anything, trying to not impress, but just get respect of the people who had come before us. Because I think now it's easy to forget that we were handed over something important. And a massive generation, an important generation handed that over. And we needed to do something with it. And if we didn't do anything with it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in terms of, I partially agree with you. Because when I look at let's call it the handing over, sometimes when we look back with nostalgia, we gloss over certain bits. And I mean, when I look at kind of my era, my generation, there were few people actually creating platforms. Makes sense.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people performing.
Yes. But in terms of holding.
In terms of actually creating spaces. And what I've always admired about what you guys did with Word and Sound is that when I look at, let's call it your generation, I eventually kind of drifted away from the scene. There are not many people that actually actively went and created a platform. And for a long time, it felt like you're the only ones doing that. And so I think it needs a different mind. It needs a different approach to actually go out and create the space.
Sure. And a commitment and a level of commitment. I think that's the one thing I found over the years. Look, I mean, I agree with you. Thinking back at it, I think maybe the platforms we're used to, again, we took them for granted because we don't know what it takes at that time to put those platforms together. You know, whether it was Monday Blues, the Dungeon, Cool Runnings, or any of the platforms around. I guess maybe we didn't know what it took then, you know. But I think by the time we made the decision, the one thing we found, like longevity, we need commitment, we need longevity. If you're going to start a platform, we have to see it through, you know. We don't have a lot of institutions that are 10 years and older. You know, we don't have platforms or just brands that have 25, 30 years as cultural brands, as institutions. And we felt that was a bit of the challenge as well, to say, okay, times will change, poetry will change, the voices will change, but every single young person needs a platform to start from somewhere. Can that at least be consistent? And then where they go from there on is still problematic. You know, we're still dealing with it today, but at least can there be a quality entry point? And that can be consistent, you know? And we felt maybe that can make a difference. But you're right in the sense that looking back at it now, you have to forgo of the what comes with it in a way, you know. We're still paying for word and sound, whether, you know, and in hindsight, thank God we paid for word and sound rather than government paying for word and sound or some other interests, you know, because it gave us the freedom to do what we wanted. It gave us the freedom not to be controlled or restricted.
And to experiment.
And to experiment, more than anything to experiment. And once we were a few years in, we then got the respect and the space to experiment. So even the institutions that we'll collaborate with, you know, we're like, okay, you guys know the ground, you're working with the young people, you lead us, you know. So I think in hindsight, that sort of gave us a lot more control over what we could do with it, you know. But there's been, I mean, parallel to us, there's Current State of Poetry, Uvus Musi Pagati, they've been organizing. Hear My Voice, NPO, Ishmael, Libo, Moafrika. They are almost as old as us, I think, probably, if not as old. Sharks in the Val. But I don't think it's the same community as what you guys had.
It's also a different time.
Yeah.
You must remember it's a different time. I mean, our time was, it was all very new and very fresh and very exciting.
Yeah.
And so, like you're saying, I mean, I remember Jungle Connection, comedians starting out, trying to find a space when comedy wasn't a thing. Rappers starting out. So, I mean, the first time I went to Jungle Connection was actually to see Black Sunshine. Yeah. Because I needed to interview them for something, and they were going to be performing there that night. And Neo was like, hey, well, we're going to be at this place. And I was staying in Berea, so it was like just down the road. And when I got there, I found the person who's organizing the thing, I knew him from Lesotho.
Sure, okay.
Julius Makweru. I was there to chat to Neo and Masauko. And I get there and I'm seeing poets getting up on stage. And I'm like, oh, you can do that?
Right.
I'd been writing poetry all along, but I didn't know that I wasn't plugged into, you know, the spoken word, seeing the open mic scene. It was going there and going, oh, like you can get up on a stage and share your poetry and people will actually listen to it. So it was all still very, you know, it was all still very new.
Sure.
And that was the excitement around it. And that was the trying to figure it out.
And there was a community around. I think it was like a lot more of you at the same time in the same space.
I think the community grew out of those spaces.
Out of those spaces, right.
It was, we were finding each other in those spaces, then finding out about Baseline in Melville. And Eric and Kenny Kenzero were running, I think it was on a Sunday once a month.
Yeah.
And then discovering that and then going there. And then meeting one or two more people. And then, I mean, because to me, Lebu, Z, Samantha, I think Chabi from Luxion Culture, Nandi, who I've had on the podcast, she was Sister Nandi then, they had Perm.
Yes, excuse me. Perm.
So they had Perm. So it was us finding each other. So I don't know how big we could say the community was, but because it was all of us kind of finding this thing and finding this space, and the space is starting to come up, and then kind of just meeting each other and finding each other and kind of going, oh, well, you know, we don't necessarily hang out, but we see each other every Thursday or every Monday or every other Sunday. So it was still very fresh. So for me, look at you guys when you did, what's it? Soul to Mouth.
Yes.
Even though I used to get very irritated with how long you ran the open mic nights in the dungeon, and the fact that if it was 5 hours, you guys were on stage for 3 of those hours, and 2 hours were left to everybody else.
We used to freestyle.
Yes. It felt more community driven for me.
Sure.
And that's why, I guess, to a certain extent, I kind of plugged into it.
Okay. We were, now from my optics, I was borrowing from what I'd seen. So, because from our side, it looked like, you guys were like this one dope crew, and that was making moves, that knew where to press the right buttons. And also we're looking at so what's the next trend? You guys were getting into spaces that just, for some of us, it was incredible. So Word and Sound, or Soul to Mouth, before Word and Sound, Soul to Mouth, I think for us was trying to recreate that in a way. Chigo Gondwe was, I think, the one person who was the most experienced, the most fired up. Love to Chigo, man. KT, Njangase. Flo was the crazy one, but I think Flo was the organizer in a way because he pulled me out of the East End. So I think even with Soul to Mouth, with Mac Manak as well, that was us trying to be...
And with Spawn.
Spawn!
Who's now he's a proper adult, unlike the rest of you.
That was us in a way, I think, trying to create super perm or something, I think looking back at it, that was because also it was a diverse group, and we could rap, we could sing, we could write and drop poems, but I think, we were influenced by you guys, whether we like it or not. And I think it was when we were starting to understand what organizing looks like. We're a group. How do we deal with the different dynamics? How do we put together shows? And I honestly did not know a lot. Chigo, I think, carried a lot of just the technical know-how. I think that time she'd been working in advertising or TV production in one way or another. So she sort of understood how to pull things together. And she probably took the most of the frustrations and probably the biggest financial hits, because she was the one investing a lot into the group as well, But I think that's where we sort of started finding our own confidence. And then Soul to Mouth was fun, but I think it was more the performance element of it, the organizing, the getting on stage, but very little fundamentals around how do we sustain this? How do we make money out of it? How do we turn it into a business? I think that time we're not even, there. You were always screaming at us. You were always the big brother going, how are you guys making money? And then we'll ask you for a lift. Are you like Labon? And then, so, but I think Soul to Mouth was instrumental for me, because I think when I got to learn what happens when people then go their separate ways, as we mature out, if you want to call it that, because that was also my other beef with you guys, is that you guys matured out of the scene, which at that time we didn't understand, because we think, but you guys are like the biggest hitters now. You guys are the most connected. You guys are in rooms we can't imagine, but we don't know what it takes to start a family. We don't know the sacrifices of having to pivot from random income, not even call it inconsistent, random income.
The random $50 you get or 200 rands you get for somebody goes, oh, come do a poem.
Right?
They're like, how much you got? I got $200. Okay, sharp. And then I'm putting $50 in the car. I'm giving the wife $100 so we can buy some groceries. And then I got $50 for myself.
No, you can't start a family like that. So yeah. So we didn't see any of that coming, We're still caught in I think also the idea that you can make a living from what you love, from the art, from creativity. I think we're interested in pushing that boundary more than anything else, in our naivety to a large extent.
Well, look, I was also, I spent, which you wouldn't know. So for 2 years, I decided I was going to make it my primary focus. Because I was already getting, the odd commission here, doing corporate and trying to push it into corporate spaces.
Yep.
Eventually, comedy took over.
Yes.
But at that time, as things were changing, some spaces were getting a bit more open to, have a poet kind of at your gala dinner. Like I've done gala dinners. I've written for, I wrote for Gibbs, the
Right.
business school,
Yeah.
because I was actually poet laureate at Gibbs.
Right.
But because the wife worked there and I had a relationship with the director, and even with them, they forced me to rethink how I'm approaching what I'm doing.
Right.
So there was a period where I went, okay, do you know what? I'm going to go all in and try and, make a living and have a livelihood from this thing, looking at the different components and taking my business understanding
Yep.
to apply to that.
Yep. And that's something you were always strong on, though.
But at that time, eventually I realized that it's just not possible.
At that time. Okay.
Like you have to do, because you have to do multiple things.
Sharp.
And it's the in-betweens. So it's, and I still approach it, I still try to approach life that way. It's the puzzle, right? So if you go, I have these particular skills. So I can copyright.
Yep.
I can perform. I can write poetry for brands. I can book poets. I can project manage, particularly in the art space. Then you're going, okay, these are my pillars.
Yeah.
That's my organizational structure. That's my internal organizational structure. How do I unpack them, and what's the consistency and income on each one of those?
Yeah. So it makes sense as a...
So it makes sense as a whole. So if in a month I'm doing one of this, two of that, four of that, but the one is a bulk, like it's a lump sum. So I spent that time, that's what I was trying to do and trying to figure out. And I could not make it work.
Sure.
And eventually I was just like, do you know what? First of all, I like nice things.
I like that.
And I have a family.
Yep.
And I came from a business background. And I'd started doing some stuff in television. I'd been writing for TV. Then there's opportunity to go into a magazine. I'm like, no, let me go all in with this particular thing.
Yep. But all of those were sort of the crumbs that you were leaving for us. Because as you were saying there, I'm laughing because that whole ecosystem, you have to figure that out, right? And that's what I've done in the last 10 years of my life, figuring out that ecosystem. Because then you go from the idea of, this talent, this single thing is going to get me everything I need, fame, money, blah, 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 all of that. And then you realize in one chamber, yes, or in one space, it can do that. But that space is not, where can this thing spread into? And for me, that was through advertising. And that's where Mama Gashaga pulled me in to say, hey, I'm looking for a copywriter. And I was like, I know nothing about copy. But she took my hand and said, look, I'll teach you what I know. But then your own natural aspiration is to kick in and drive, And that for me, that's when it clicked, that my ability to write or to do creative writing is not just limited to poetry. And I have to be realistic about where else do I spread it. And then that's when the world opens up. Because then you start worrying about how do I create consistent income. So when you're talking about writing for corporates now, this year has probably been one of the slowest years in terms of doing corporate work. But over the last few years, that's really what I've been doing. And the fact that when you guys started it, it was such a small field. It was, about who you knew or which corporates were even open to that kind of thinking. Now it almost feels like corporates know that if you want to start a conference properly, you have to have a poet there because they are not entertainment. They are the message. And that's what we bring into that space. And we've managed to open that up. But it took you guys. By the time I got into advertising and started putting poetry into advertising, because the first thing I had to do was to write advertising, not write poetry. And that's when you have to shed your ego and go through a whole reincarnation of how else you can apply your skills. By the time we were putting poetry on TV, let's say through Channel O, brand pieces or stuff we did at SABC2, felt like things were getting a lot easier. Things were opening up, but all of it felt like it was preceded by something else, by other people pushing small doors, by planting ideas. And where it is now, I see other poets who are half my age who are already doing corporate work. And it hasn't taken them 10, 15 years to get to doing that level of earning. And their outlook on poetry is performance 5%, right? Everything else is I'm writing corporate communications here, I'm performing for a corporate there, I'm running a residency here, or I've got some sort of a literature-related business going, whether I'm publishing my own books, I'm doing merchandise. But there's a lot more entrepreneurship around, I think, just literature nowadays, which I'm enjoying, but I see where it comes from, and I laugh because for a lot of us, we take it for granted in terms of where we are now.
I think it's also, I guess the younger generations are less precious about some of these things.
Sure.
And I've had this conversation, particularly with former colleagues or peers, like in magazine, right? Former magazine editors. Magazine editors are a particular personality. They love magazine. They love the form. They love the platform. It's not just okay. It's a job.
Yeah.
And I don't have that. I don't have that. I am absolutely precious about this thing. Like I worked in the space, and
But you're not a print guy.
I enjoy it. But I mean, I started editing magazines in my 30s.
But you guys had some good titles though.
But second half of my 30s. So it was because I was like, I can write, and I'm interested in storytelling in whatever form.
So you saw that as a pivot.
So it wasn't even a pivot. It was just, here's an opportunity.
Sure. Okay. Expand.
And let me learn about it.
Sure.
Like I had to learn about, the format and work on my craft. Like I wasn't just, now it's not just writing. It's looking at the whole thing and looking at, okay, who is the reader? Who is part of my community and what's important to them? And therefore, how do I ensure that I'm exposing them to, and I'm sharing stories that are relevant to them and contextual to them? So it takes some understanding of people.
Yep.
And getting better at the craft of it. But I learned that, like I didn't study journalism.
Yeah.
So I learned that because I was in that space.
Do you think, but is that because of you, who you are as a person? Because there's format phobia, and especially for us writers, where if you grow up in the mindset, I'm a talented writer, this is what I'm good at, and then we say, now go write 30-second radio advert and take your poetry and your voice out of it. And here's the thing, right? That's a whole new format you have to write. It's a whole new format you have to learn and understand and give into it and understand the rules and limitations of it. I found like a lot of writers, at least my generation, refuse to even expand. And you're right, it's not a pivot. It's almost like an expansion of what you can do, right? That's why I call it like format phobia, because people don't, it's hard to...
I guess I don't have that. Like I came to writing, so from a semi-professional perspective, I came to writing business proposals and reports.
Yeah, I remember that.
For my father's business.
Right. I remember. And that was your...
So at 15, 16, I was doing his research for him and editing and typing. So that's how I came to writing. Poetry I was doing before. But poetry was this thing I did in my notebooks at home. An occasional girlfriend in high school. But that was what poetry was. It was I need to get the stuff out of my head. And I talk about it often. Like I started off just writing thoughts. And then eventually like the line shortened and I'm like, oh, look, I guess I could call this poetry. And I did that throughout high school, but it was a thing I did on the side. Not many people knew that I did it. Whereas my entry into writing was my father's management consulting companies pitching for a project.
And you have to put a proposal together.
And there's a proposal that needs to be put together. And so I am working with him on putting together a proposal. So I guess because of that, and then he had a newspaper. So I wrote for the newspaper.
So again, format, and you've been chiseled into
I worked in the newspaper. I worked on the operations of the newspaper. Like I used to take it to the printers every week.
Sharp.
There was writers, there was an editor. I had a column, which was my own column that I wrote. And eventually only shut it down after I'd moved to Joburg. So I was still sending my column, I was faxing my column every week. In those days, you could only fax. So I'd handwrite it and put it in the fax, and then they'll type it up when it gets there, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I wrote for 1 or 2 magazines. Like I said, how I ended up at Jungle Connection was I'd hustled a little writing gig because I was having hassles with my IT business because I had an IT business when I started doing poetry.
I remember.
So I had hustled a gig to write a profile of Black Sunshine for Cosmopolitan magazine.
Cosmo.
And so that's I was writing on the side because it's like I could do it.
Yeah. I'm complete the other end.
So everything that I've done has been, there's an opportunity, I can write. So I can learn how to write for that thing. Then I'll go ahead and do it.
I came in from the other end. I literally I'm learning, the business part of it and the business format. Let's call it that. The business format is something I'm only learning now. Whereas I come from hip hop. Hip hop is my introduction into poetry. And then when I got frustrated with hip hop, towards the end of high school, you hear Saul Williams and you're like, this is not hip hop, but it's, And for me, everything has been self-taught. I didn't go to the most English writing I've done as it was in high school. I didn't even go to Wits. I was at Wits for like 5 months. And then I was like, this is not happening. I'm not selling Avery Schlane products, So for me, writing, especially creative writing, has been from natural aspiration, talent, and then just putting it out. How to write a poem. I used to fight with my teacher in high school about what is a poem, a mending wall, John Donne and all of that. I'm like, this is boring, And then you get the creative writing out. I guess, whether you go to school or not, if you're talented, you're talented. But then later, moving to format, I think that's what saved my life. Poetry saved my life by making that sort of expansion. Otherwise, I could still write poems, and then what? You know what I mean? So for me, I'll say poetry saved my life in the sense that I'm living now and I'm making a living through poetry because that was the entry point. But then being able to open up your mind and learn the other formats and be disciplined with the other formats. I mean, even when I started with advertising, Mama Gashag, I had a hard time to like, dude, you don't know how to write a billboard. I'm like, where do you see a billboard with my name on it, Taking your voice out of copy and being able to respond to what the client wants, what the product is, being malleable. I think I only got to learn those when I realized that the performance part of it alone is not enough to sustain me. Where else do you go? What else can you do with your creative writing? And the more I leaned in onto that, I think the stronger I became in that format. Which other business areas can I take my poetry? So even now with corporate conferences, it's such a beautiful space. And I think finally they understand the role poetry plays as communication within what they're trying to do. A lot of time it's easy to put on the music, the dance, the nice venue, but the poet brings that, that core. And I think for me, I'm thriving now because I was able to open up and be open to learning and being taught and expanding my writing, to just beyond poetry.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
A doctor.
At 11, 12 years old.
My mom was convinced.
Was your mom convinced or was your mom pushing you?
I think a bit of both. I mean, I was born in Katlehong, but grew up in Hammanskraal in between. You know, when Katlehong was hot, we moved to Hammanskraal. So the only careers there post-apartheid are like, yo, you gotta be a doctor, you gotta be a lawyer, you gotta be an engineer. And my mom, because she was in teaching, I think that's sort of for her, it was, you know, natural way to go. But I think when I moved back to Joburg at the age of 13, that sort of started fading. When my mom saw, okay, this one is a little bit more artistic than academic, but she still pushed me towards, you know, sort of some sort of formal qualification. And she had to give up on that much later. You know, I honestly wanted to be a doctor at some stage. I thought I could do it. And then I realized that, nah. When I found out like 7 years after high school, I was like, nah, it's okay. It's hard enough to make it through high school.
And then the music, you talk about hip hop and hip hop being kind of the thing that opened you up to a particular path. At what stage was that?
1998, 97, 98. My uncle was a DJ, but he used to DJ with cassettes and that double decker with the vinyl on top, wooden speakers, lovely. So we used to carry that sound, you know, he used to play around the neighborhood in Hammanskraal. So the first time I heard any hip hop was a tape, a Snoop Dogg tape that he had, the Doggy Style album, I think. What's My Name? And then Bob TV, I think, was still on at the time. And that was the first time I saw a hip hop video, which was the What's My Name video. So that sort of hit me. It lingered, but my uncle played a lot more disco, you know, that's how I know the 10 City mixtape. That's how I know Robin S. and, you know, all of that classic, you know, before it became...
That's more house, Chief, not disco.
Before it became house, there's a disco transition.
Those are the roots of house. Chief.
The 10 City mixtape.
That's my area, okay? That's my era. It's not disco. The disco is like 70s, early 80s.
But the 10 City mixtape is just reeking of disco influence. Anyway, when I moved back to Joburg, I didn't understand like that hip hop influence sort of had lingered or stayed, you know? Because when I got here, that's when I was exposed to a lot more sort of hip hop music on radio, I think on TV. And that became I guess the rest of high school became my go-to. I was a bit of a rapper in high school. We used to freestyle. I was not much of a battle rapper. I've always tried to write like meaningful stuff, you know? So I think hip hop, conscious hip hop, your Nas's, your KRS's, the stuff I came across after I left Hammanskraal back in Joburg, I think that's what sort of conscientized me around writing, what writing can do. If I'm going to be an artist, what type of message and art I wanted to do. I think I was always leaning more towards storytelling. I think Nas was one of those great influences when it comes to storytelling. When I came across Sir Williams, I think that gave me the pivot. Z Leaf, I think was the first local poet that I heard who was like on that hip hop slam, you know, and then Sir Williams. And I think for me, that became two pivotal sort of points in terms of how do I take what I wanted to do with hip hop, but into a format that actually appreciates storytelling, that appreciates messaging. And I felt like hip hop was changing at that time, you know. Superman Go became one of the hits, you know. So for me...
But at the same time, Lyricist Lounge, kind of the Black Star, Mos Def, you know, Yassine Bey now, Talib. There was even the Roots, there was another lane.
Yep.
So while there's the jiggy stuff, there was another lane that you could plug into as well.
Yeah, we grew up in that, where even on a dance floor, there would be time for jiggy hip hop, and there'd be time for conscious hip hop, and then there'd be time for dancing. You know, even on radio, there'd be, you know. But yeah, I was fortunate that in what we call the golden era of hip hop, debatable, but you could tap into the conscious stream, if you want to call it that, and then still appreciate the commercial stream, your biggies, and what is happening there. But I think I found my home more in that conscious stream. I used to buy CDs to be able to read the lyrics, you can still buy CDs and read the lyrics, order them through Musica and they'll deliver a month later. We used to buy hip hop magazines, your Double XL,
Rap pages.
Yeah, Rap Pages, Source, that for us was our entire world. By the time Hype came out here, we quickly jumped into, but Y Mag, for example, also played a pivotal role in sort of storytelling. And I think for me, that became I still have a stack of Y Mags in my mother's garage, that I've collected. But I think for me, storytelling became sort of what I was pulled towards, and that shaped and the poet I became and what I decided to do with my poetry, and eventually just moving away from hip hop. I think like I've done more with poetry than I would have done with rap or hip hop, especially in this country. I think, yeah.
What did you go to Wits to study?
Marketing. I was convinced they could teach me marketing. And in my head, marketing was making adverts. I wanted to make adverts when I left high school because I'd seen cool Sprite ads. And it made sense. It's like, that's the stuff I want to do. I want to come up with creative concept. I just didn't know what it was called. I don't know you could go to Vega or AAA or, for me, it was
still, they were all still new then.
Yep.
Like there was, you came up in a very interesting period in the history of even the city.
Yep.
Where the foundation was being laid for a lot of things, particularly within the kind of creative sector, that are now old and considered part of the landscape.
Yep. Yeah.
But we're starting out then, and everybody was still trying to figure out.
What is this film school thing? And your mother was no way your mother was going to let you study film or go study any advertising. What are you going to do? So for me, marketing, was sold as that sort of catch-all. And then in the first few months, I realized that they're starting with personal selling, and it requires me to carry Ivory Lane products or duvets and go to door. In my neighborhood, no, that was not going to fly. I was too young, I was too pretty, and no, I'm not selling duvets. Luckily, I found what had just come out then was IMM, School of Marketing, I think. I remember the gentleman, Charles Stoddle. Old man, he's the guy who ultimately got me back to into advertising and falling in love with communication as a science, as a field. I think he's the one who broke through what Wits was trying to do, and we went straight into comms design. What is the role of communication? Why do we need it? Where does it fit in? And I think that then opened up my mind. I did a year there. Afterwards, I moved to Malawi and did some other stuff. But I think the light had been switched on. From there on, it was a lot of just self-study, getting a lot of material, moving to another country and learning how things work in that country. Even to this day, I don't have formal university education. Everything I know has been just applying myself. Internships, volunteering. Chigo Gwandwe got me into volunteering, and she taught me a lot around comms, around TV, even just the whole crossover from artist into communication design and that field. So I found that by just learning and applying myself, that's why, I've learned what I've learned and it's worked.
What did you go and do in Malawi again? I remember I just heard you're leaving.
I was heartbroken. I left. My then girlfriend decided she's going to go to Rhodes to go do her degree at Rhodes. And I was like, I know Rhodes. It's a student town. I'm not going to do a long distance relationship. So I went to Malawi. There's a friend of mine in Malawi who was running a youth magazine called Abstract Beats. He's a music producer, but he was also running a YFM a Y Mag, sorry, of Malawi. And he asked me to come help him with operations and also edit the magazine. And that's when I got to now get into sort of publishing as a format and understanding what they were doing there. deadlines, contributions, how does it work, blah, blah, blah. But not just, from the writing part of it and that, but also operations as well. He was running a nice ship, but he was the only one there who sort of had an idea. Everyone else was hands-on, but he needed a bit more experience. And that also gave me a lot more understanding about how to run a business behind the scenes and all of that, and which when I came back, I was grown up. I think Malawi sort of just, put a bit of fire in me. You also realize how many opportunities you have in your country until you step out of the country. I think you take a lot for granted until you are in a space where there's a lot more that is not plug and play, that you have to build from scratch, that forces you to think differently. And Malawi gave me that. Plus a bit of business experience, plus a new format as well that I learned with my creative writing. So that's one of my pillars, I think, to this day, that trip. And as somebody told me after high school, go travel to an African country, especially, I would have done that sooner than later.
At least you did.
At least I did.
One of my favorite questions, how do you navigate parenting within all of this? Parenting and working, having a business with your wife, formerly partner, girlfriend, formerly. How do you navigate that? Especially in with a business that, like you've said, it's been self-funded for 15 years.
Yeah.
And continues to be self-funded. I could imagine that because you both work on it, it has the potential to create tension
all the time
when you're struggling with maintaining the family. And then even if it requires both of your energies, what happens with the kids?
That's a lot. And I think, one, because I'm a parent now. Like, I've decided I'm a parent first. I need to raise those girls. So I've been a lot more working from home, even pre-COVID. I think COVID was just a stamp, on this thing is possible. So I was already worrying about multi-stream income, even outside of Word and Sound. Word and Sound, that's not a business anymore. That's our baby. That's our firstborn. It's going to cost us until we die, but we know what we're doing it, right? I had to, I think, on my side, get serious about sorting myself out. So at some stage I was working as a cultural project manager, blah, blah, collected all of that experience. But ultimately I knew that I wanted to start my own consultancy because that's where I felt I can have control of my time and do the things that I wanted to do. So all of that working and full-time gave me that, because when our first child was born, I wanted to be a father who is there. I wanted to raise my girl. No, go to the office 9 o'clock and whatnot, and I've had the opportunity to do that. But what it means is that my wife has a full-time job, which is Digify Africa, and she runs that. Word and Sound is a hobby that we do on the side, and we push some resources to. I have a consultancy that I have been running for the last 5 years, and that is what has forced me to then make sure that every single month there is some income and there is some work being done. Whether it's a year contract that I'm doing, for example, writing business proposals in the cultural sector, I understand that space very well. Whether I'm writing for corporates, but I've managed to pull together a system that at least creates consistent income, but more than importantly, gives me back my time. Because I think what I've cherished the most is being able to be a parent. I grew up, I think, not in a tightest, close-knit family. So I wanted to do this different for myself. I wanted to be a hands-on parent. I wanted to be a hands-on father. And being given girls just heightens everything. Where we are now in terms of balancing work and family, she's also working from home. I think COVID has also allowed us that. We've got a full office set up at home. The challenging part is who prioritizes what. And I think I've prioritized parenting, and she's prioritized working and bringing in the income. Not that I don't bring in income. I bring in income. In some instances, I bring in more income than her. In some instances, she brings in more income than me. But the way I deal with it is the income for the household. And from that income in the household, we're able to do what we need to do. The biggest challenge has been, how do we make time for the children while we are working from home, while we are doing multiple things? Because it's not just Digify Africa. It's not just task as a consultancy. She also has her personal things she's doing. I also have personal things that I'm doing as well. But it's building a strong foundation in the household. I think that's one thing we created from scratch. Everything starts in the household. We don't have a strong household if you and I are not together, if you and I are not getting along, if you and I are not best friends, how are we going to raise these kids? So for us, it starts with the two of us being a good foundation, being best friends to each other, and being able to speak through, we are doing this for the first time. We are helping each other grow here, So what do you know? What do I know? How do we sharpen each other as we get through this? And I think for me, as a man, you step up, We talk about leadership, but what is leadership? Leadership is not a grand thing that you do. It's the simple, everyday choices that I found that you have to make and show up for your family. So that's all I live for now. For the last 6 years, I've quietened my social spaces. My social friend list is this small in terms of friends, but I wake up every single day and the first focus is the girls, making sure the girls are okay. Because I can bring in all the money in the world, but I don't have time for the girls. So for me, it's always saying, like, how do I make sure that, it's difficult. There's no science to it, I don't have a lot of good examples that I lean on. That's why my space is very small, So you are one of very few people who are like, oh, okay, and that Kojo is still holding that together. Tito and Leisha are still holding that together, So there's very few people that I look up to, but otherwise everything else is between the wife and I in terms of how do we balance. We've got crazy kids. They demand a lot. We are also trying to be progressive parents. We're also trying to make sure that, we don't overpressure ourselves with creating a better life for our kids. I've already created a better life for my kids. My mom never picked me up with a car at school, my entire school career. That child knows nothing but a car to school. Done. I've given her a better life. You understand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, she has a bigger house than I do. She's grew up in a bigger house than I did. Better life sorted, So I think a lot of the time is also just navigating your partner. How do we make sure that the two of us don't lose each other while we are taking care of these kids, the household, the demands, the job, the whatnot, that we still friends and lovers, because it started with us. It's been a long time we've been together. If we forget that, I think we'll be weaker. So for me, it's a balancing of that, the love, the kids, the income, but income has not been sort of my driving goal. It's important, yes, but I think in the last 5-6 years, making sure those girls have a solid environment and a solid space that exemplifies good things. As a father in the household, it starts with me. If I want a clean house, it starts with me, So yeah, a lot of it has been very selfishly looking at the girls and focusing on the household. I don't have a social life.
I mean, it's
how do you do it?
It's amusing to me. I don't have a social life. I haven't had a social life for years. I'm not particularly interested in having a social life. I think I've had one before. I know what it's like. I've done my part. But it's interesting here you describe it, because there are parallels.
Okay.
Between, let's call it, your realizations.
Yeah.
And your restructuring of your life.
Yeah.
With what I've also done over the last 10 plus years.
Yeah.
But I think particularly as men, you said something which for me is really critical. It's like this idea that you are less than when your wife or your partner earns more money than you.
That's crazy.
Like in the days when we first met and I was, we're doing poetry and all of these things, my wife had a job. she always made more than I did. And my approach was exactly the same as you're describing it. It's what's coming into the household, because we're a unit.
Yes, sir.
It's like, it's the family money.
So I'm not mad, right? When people speak about, married people speak about my money and her money, I go, I'm confused. I don't understand that concept that two married people, a couple in a family, in a household can say, it's my money, it's her money. I thought it was the family's money, the household money. Therefore, we prioritize, yes, if I want a stock suite, I can go buy a stock suite, right? But I'm still responsible with the resources that belong to the household, right? I'm not gonna go and blow that money. And the resources can sit in my account, can sit in your account, but these are resources that we are all, both of us, working hard for to bring into this household, to achieve certain things, to build a life, to be comfortable, both of us, to be progressive, right?
I mean, so I have certain bills I'm responsible for.
Sure, yes.
And she has certain bills she's responsible for. And it's not even, you're not even sitting and going, is it equal?
No.
Like, it's who is in a better position to, and for a long time, for when I was driving you people around, it was 90% her.
Sure.
From medical aid and insurance and all of these things, right? And then as life happens, sometimes it leans my way, sometimes it leans her way. But there's certain things I'm responsible for, which are the household thing, like school fees and all of these things, rent, and the things that she's responsible for. How I manage what's left over is up to me. But the important thing is...
You have that?
But the important thing is these are the household requirements.
I thought I was crazy because, and I think how you've broken it down is the practicality of how it happens.
Yeah.
Right. On a month end, how do we pay the bills? Other people choose to have a central account. All the money from both sides gets put in there. Debit orders go out. Other people is you pay for that, you pay for that. We are cognizant of how much is coming into your account, how much. So therefore, you cover this, cover that. That's the practicality of it. But what is the mindset behind it? The mindset is that we are a unit.
Yeah.
We are contributing to I can't wake up and say Thabiso feels like a holiday. Thabiso's going on a holiday because Thabiso feels like he worked for the money, right? That died the minute I said I do. The minute I went to her parents and said, can I please have her in marriage? The minute I introduced her to my family, Thabiso ended that day in terms of the individual who thinks about what he wants. Now it has to be about what I want in context.
But also, if you're gonna take a holiday, it's a conversation. It's like a listen, I need a bit of a break. So, it goes without saying that the household stuff is covered. But it's like, hey, I need a bit of a break, so I'm thinking of doing X, Y, Z. Cool, sharp. I mean, I've been talking about it for 15 years. I was always like, I want to be able to, every 2 months, take a weekend away.
Yep.
Alone.
I do it. Well, not every 2 months, but once a year.
I've never done it. Like
once a year, you book a B&B or a cottage somewhere, and you just go cry. You go cry, talk to yourself.
Look, I don't want to go cry.
Cut trees.
I wanted to go read.
or read, or do what, or do. But even.
But I wanted to go be.
Yes.
Be myself, not my role or responsibilities.
To recharge yourself, because you are no separate from that you bring into the unit, right? But that contribution is important. It has to be replenished. You have to check yourself and so forth. And it's easy that once you get into structure, whatnot. Okay, I'm always giving, I'm giving. I don't need to recharge. I'm fathering. Because it's also easy to go that way until you are depleted and dead and say, oh, but I've been fathering the best. When your kids look for a active, present father who has energy, you are depleted. So you have to make those conscious decisions. But when you are married to your best friend, all of that makes sense. Nothing is in competition. A strong me is not a weaker her, or vice versa. Me wanting to go replenish is not taking, more than anything, it's part of the practical things we need to do. She also needs to recharge. She also goes through burnout. She goes through a lot, right? But we have to bring certain energies to the relationship, to the unit. We have to take care of the individuals. But if we are friends, then a lot of it is not hard to work out because we genuinely care about each other. Before we were parents, we were friends. Before we were husband and wife, we were friends. We've always wanted the best for each other. We've always wanted to grow. Now it's gotten a bit more complex, but the principle is still the same. Maybe I'm very naive with my approach to marriage and companionship, But I see, but for me, this makes the most practical sense. Also, if you consider in the long term, guys, things change, right? We come from an era where men were the breadwinners. That was their favorite word, breadwinning, How many of our fathers have actually built anything lasting out of their breadwinning? How many of our families have fallen apart because of that breadwinning and, this mindset around what being a man is and, that's gone. That doesn't work. I feel like we're at the worst part of masculinity and manning. Nobody wants to man anymore. People think manning is this materialistic show up or this, egotistic position around, oh, as a man, I have achieved. We have to show up for our daughters. Do you know what kind of a world we live in? Right? For me, that's
to show up for all of our children. I have a boy and a girl, so
hey,
it's not just the
I have girls, so for me it's like, yo, Cheso.
But it's it's also how we parent our sons, how we parent our daughters. I mean, you have just girls. I have becoming a young man, so I have a boy and a girl.
Okay.
And I've had to look at how I parent differently and try to parent more according to the different personalities and characters as opposed to the different gender. So I read something years ago. A friend had posted it, and I try to use this as a principle. So it's around the word no. So we all the conversation was around, girls being able to say no. But boys have to be able to hear no. If you say no, but the person's not hearing no, it's a problem. I applied that to both of my children.
So they both
have
to hear.
If my daughter was doing something to irritate my son and he says stop, I'm like, when somebody says stop, you stop. That's both of you.
Yep.
I'm not sitting and focusing on my son and saying, hey, listen, because of the spaces we live in.
Right.
When somebody says stop, you stop.
And especially with somebody of the other gender says stop.
It must be understood that if somebody's not comfortable with something, they're not comfortable with it, and therefore you should stop. So it's we try to teach our daughters to show up as themselves fully, right? So they shouldn't have to shrink or withdraw certain parts of their selves when they enter spaces. But my son also needs to understand that it's everybody's right to be able to show up as themselves fully in spaces.
And let your character then
and therefore you can show up fully in spaces, but your sister must also be able to show up fully in spaces. And I don't know whether, I believe that success as a parent is probably when you're long gone.
True.
When you look at the human beings they've turned into. And and their character and their respect.
Sure,
and
yes.
and how they carry themselves and how they interact with others. So for me, that'll be success. But I can't determine that.
And you've had longer time, I guess, as a parent. You've been parent longer, and your kids are older. I guess maybe it's a lot more apparent. Like my first daughter's 6, and I find that most of what she is modeled from what she sees in the household, which then has, because sometimes you're like, I'm doing my best as a parent, but am I consciously doing my best as a parent? But now that she's 6 and she can, model more, and I find that everything she is what we do in the household, and there's been, yes, now she's about to turn 7 next year, starting a bit more training, deliberate life skills and so forth. But everything she is right now, in terms of how she behaves, is based on what she sees in the household. So she sees what I do, she sees what her mother does, and that has formed her primary sort of personality now. But there hasn't been a conscious, I guess for me, a conscious, these are the 7 things that I need to make sure she learns by this time, or here's a book she needs to, it's almost been trying to exemplify as much as possible, but being conscious also of what the household sort of, and I'll hear when she goes to another household where the behavior is different. It's like, no, Dada, the Malume so-and-so did this. I've never seen you do that. I think it's wrong. And I'm like, oh, look at you.
But you see, I mean, you're still at the stage where she's about to hit the stage where it starts to become about the outside world. It starts to become about friends, like going into primary school. At some stage, it'll stop becoming about either of you. And it'll literally be about what's outside.
Oh, Lord.
Right? And I also don't have like a list of things, but it's kind of like you try and model behavior and how you interact with people and how you interact with the world, and to a certain extent hope that they've internalized it in their own way, such that regardless of their age, when they're out in the world, that's their foundation. Because she's still going to discover more about herself and what she likes and what she doesn't like. And at that age, maybe because she hasn't been exposed, so she's going into another space and seeing how they're doing it, and she's like, okay, I think it's wrong.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense because I know this and I'm comfortable with this. And then she's exposed to multiple ones. And then it gets to the point where it's like, actually, I like this way better.
That's when the rebellion starts.
Right? And it's literally just a process with no clear, with no clear manual, no clear steps.
Yep.
So for me, it's always been, I try to do the best that I can. I try to live the best that I can and model stuff. At the same time, I'm trying to figure life out still. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing, where I'm going, like all of those things.
Right.
Like I'm still, at the same time, I have a responsibility of my family. And when you're talking about like manning, I'm like, how I was raised and my understanding is I have a responsibility and duty to my family that supersedes everything else. Including how I feel.
Yes.
And yes, it's perhaps not ideal or conducive to my mental state, but that's how I was raised. So I'm still trying to figure out, like, I'm still trying to have ease of mind and at the same time fulfill my duty with all its challenges. And at the same time, I'm supposed to help these people. So my thing has always been, my job is to try and help my children gain the tools to navigate life moving forward. Because I'm not going to be there to fix it for them. So how, like, in whatever way I can, my son turned 18, and I said to him, I'm like, dude, there are going to be down moments. There are going to be up moments. For me, it's important that you're able to deal with the down and get through it. And when you're up, also not get too ahead of yourself and too full of yourself that you start to manifest characteristics and characteristics and actions that are not in line with our values as a family.
True.
But that's all I can do, because at some stage, they're building their own lives. Not at some stage. From when they're born, they're building their own lives.
True.
We're just helping get them there.
And I'm hoping I can bring at least the best of what I have. But like I said, we're not okopili. We still go grade one. We're like, oh my gosh,
But actually, if you think about it, I mean, how old are you when your daughter was born?
She's now 6. I'm 43. So I was 36, 37.
So my son was born when I was 35. My daughter was born when I was 38,
Okay.
39.
Same timeline.
So yeah.
Different decades.
Exactly. Okay, so my last question. What is exciting you right now?
Ooh, in general or just?
In whatever comes to mind. There's no specification in terms of, is it in life? Is it in general?
Yeah.
Is it work? Is it just what's exciting you right now? If anything.
I think first, my family right now. I genuinely love my family setup right now. Like married with 2 kids, the kind of foundation we've built, the kind of structure, the cohesion we have. It's hard, there's challenges, but there's lots of wins, but we feel like a unit, and for me personally, that's a massive milestone. I've always been a loner. I've always, never, got into many spaces, couldn't fit in many spaces, but I feel like, I have my own space now that I can be selfish about, I can control, that makes sense to me. So that excites me every day. Those 2 girls are literally crazy. So every day is an adventure. The youngest one, Leruo, she's worse. She just turned 2 and full speech now. So can you imagine a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old? So that is honestly the one thing that gets me excited every single day. Also work. I think this poetry thing, has been such an integral part of my life that it feels like another part of me, like a baby. So every day we're waking up, we're problem solving. We're trying to see where can word and sound go now. We're looking at the new generation of voices, and we're excited about that. And we again reaffirming our position. We are for the youth. We are for that young person who has never performed, who's got poems but has never been on a stage. We want that person, and we want to stay there. So that gets me up every day. And I think just what I'm doing now and capable of doing, I think I'm in a very interesting space of my life. I own my time. I have a lot of experience in a number of fields. So I'm flexible in terms of where I spend energy and what I can do. I love what I'm doing with it. There's no specifics, but I think it's very rare to wake up in the morning and just feel like I'm challenged. But I'm not challenged and going to fall apart. I'm challenged, by the things that I need, whether it's actual work, whether you're project managing, whether it's you're sorting out family dynamics, whether you're working out a schedule with your wife, whether work out a schedule as business partners. But I find that all of that challenging, but I find that it's all in the right space. It all makes sense. I love all of it. My life excites me right now. I think I'm not gonna complain. I think I'm in a very good space. I think I've come a long way. I've done a lot. I've done a lot of good, and I'm excited to just grow from here. I think poetry has a very interesting space in South Africa right now and the world. there's a plethora of new technologies that I think we can take advantage of, as creatives, as writers. I think it'd be interesting what we do with that space. I'm into crypto now and blockchain. So that's also exciting because like new technologies feels like the dot-com bubble, but this time we're actually adults and we know what to do with it, So investing in crypto and blockchain and learning that space and seeing how it can change the world. And especially for the creative sector, there's a lot of things it can do, especially around copyright and ownership and all of that. So yeah, I'm excited for the future. That's me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You had stuff to talk about.
Look, luckily I'm catching up with my big brother, so I'm fine with that. I'm always my own worst critic. But thank you for your life. I think this conversation, for me, more than anything else, is just an opportunity to look back and look at where it all started, people who influenced it. But again, the role you continue to play and the impression I've had in your life. And thank you for being a big brother, I think, for all of these years. That's one thing you've always done, just been hard on me, consistent. But it all makes sense now. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.